Would you say it out loud? Daniel's vision. And this is Daniel chapter 7. If you go to this first slide, I want to go through this fairly quickly. Uh, uh, we've seen this before, and this morning of all times, I was getting all this down in my own notes, and which I always print my notes in real big type face, so I don't have to use reading glasses. And my printer decided to die on me this morning, and so I was able to email to Philip, and they rescued me, and they printed my notes, but it came out in a normal typeface. So the ones with the sparkles on them. These are good. I'm happy with these. Okay, we'll vote then. These are these. Okay. We, it's something to me because when my part of my history is when I was 19, I was nearsighted, and discovered when I was in early teens, and because couldn't read the blackboard or chalkboard in school. Actually, it wasn't black; it was green. But and so I was fitted for glasses, and then when I was 19, God supernaturally healed me, and even today, my far vision is still better than 20/20. But then after I hit past 40, and to be quite honest with you, I just didn't use my faith on it for needing reading glasses. Isn't that stupid? Thank you so much for identifying me. So, uh, so thank God for reading glasses. Uh, Daniel chapter 2, verse 31. This is just the end of it and we saw this in detail before, but it's the end of it when in Daniel chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar, who is the king of Babylon, everybody say it out loud, Babylon. He was the king of Babylon, had a dream and a vision during the night. It absolutely terrified him, and it was so terrifying he couldn't remember what he even dreamed. And so he called in all of his wise men, astronomers, soothsayers, everybody who before he had used to interpret dreams, and they all said the same thing. They said, "Tell us the dream and we'll interpret it." And he said, "No, no, no." He said, "You tell me what the dream was and then you interpret it." And they said, "Well, we can't do that." And he said, "Well, then if you can't, you're worthless to me. And so I'm going to have everyone who's a member of what was called the wise men, I'm going to have all of you executed and your families executed, and then turn your houses into rubble." And so a member of the Babylonian government who was responsible for rounding up the wise men, but he was friends with Daniel, went to Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and told them about the king's commandment. And Daniel said, "Would you please ask the king, give us 24 hours here, and I'm going to pray and ask God to show us what happened." And so that night God did show Daniel. And so Daniel came back to the king the next day and told him what his dream was, and then told him the interpretation of it. And before we even start here, what it had to do was this. Nebuchadnezzar was the king of where? Babylon. Babylon, everybody know Babylon is east of Jerusalem. How many didn't know it was east of Jerusalem? Quite a few. Okay. We'll see it on a map here in a second, and we'll go to the book of maps. But but Babylon is in modern day Iraq, and so it's well east of Jerusalem by quite a number of over 300 miles or so, and so it's where Nebuchadnezzar had sent his armies in. They had destroyed Jerusalem, and they took all of the the people they didn't kill, they took back in a death march to Babylon to make them slaves and to integrate them into Babylonian society, where they would forget where they came from and actually become loyal servants in the Babylonian kingdom. So Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're 4 young Hebrew men who never ever bowed their knees to these false gods. And so here in Daniel chapter 2 is when Daniel comes to the great notice of the king of the whole of what was considered one of the world's great kingdoms, the Babylonian kingdom, and I'll show you something in just a moment, because you'll see these expressions. It says over all the earth, and really when it says that, it's not talking about all the earth in the sense of as we look at the earth, because all the earth would include North America, South America, Canada, right? But it was all the earth, and when they said all the earth, they're referring to the entire Babylonian kingdom, and that's important to point out, because the vision he had is directly concerning all the territories that were controlled by Nebuchadnezzar under the Babylonian kingdom, and he's talking about 4 kingdoms altogether, but 3 that would come after Nebuchadnezzar that would control all the regions that Nebuchadnezzar controlled. So let's start here. Daniel chapter 2, verse 31. Daniel's giving the interpretation, and because what Nebuchadnezzar saw was an image or a statue of a human-like creature, a man in armor, and it says, "O king, you, O king, were watching, and behold, a great image." Say it out loud, a great image. "This image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you. Its form was awesome. The image's head," say it out loud, its head was of fine gold. Say it out loud, was of fine gold. Then it moves to, he says, its chest and arms, would you say it out loud, made out of silver. Then he goes to belly and thighs, and would you say it out loud, bronze. And the equivalent of that is also brass, bronze or brass. And then in verse 33, its legs, would you say it out loud, its legs were made out of iron, and you don't have to repeat after me on this part, were made out of iron, and then it shifts into the feet, and the feet were partly iron and partly clay. Some translations render that potter's clay. It says, "You watch while a stone was cut without hands, and that stone which was cut without hands struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them into pieces." The stone that was cut without hands is a reference to the Lord Jesus Christ, and it's a reference to the end of the tribulation period. And so here, this last kingdom, the one that was iron, and then later on it's referred to as the feet of it, or the very base of it is iron mixed with clay, is a resurgence of that empire that's talked about, that its legs were completely of iron. Okay, and then verse 38, Daniel gives the interpretation. He says, "You are," talking to Nebuchadnezzar, "this head of gold, but after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours." Would you say it out loud? Symbolism. So it's symbolism that was expressed in seeing this image. It says, "You shall arise from you another kingdom inferior to yours, then another, a third kingdom of bronze." So the second kingdom is going to be the one out of silver. Third kingdom is going to be the one out of bronze. It says, "which shall rule over," and it says, and then here's this expression, "over all the earth." Well, we'll see in a moment, because again, I just want to walk you through maps for a second of these, what it's talking about. It says, "shall rule over all the earth." The fourth kingdom, say it out loud, the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron. Now that fourth kingdom is the one that's made up of the feet, which are iron mixed with clay. Shall be as strong as iron, insomuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything, like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay, partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. Yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom will be partly strong and partly fragile. And you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay. They will mingle with the seed of men, but they shall not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in those days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. Say it out loud. A kingdom which shall never be destroyed. Well, every human kingdom that's existed in history, that kingdom has ceased to exist or it's been destroyed. He said this kingdom will never be destroyed. Never here literally means never. I mean, that's only referring to the kingdom that Jesus is going to set up. So it's talking about the millennial reign of Jesus that'll go right on into the eternity of eternities. And so he says that kingdom will never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, because Jesus, he'll rule and reign forever. It shall break in pieces, talking about Jesus, and consume all these kingdoms, and it, Jesus' kingdom, shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and the interpretation of it is sure. And so this represents the nations that will rule over the area that Babylon ruled over until the time of the tribulation. Now, Nebuchadnezzar, at this point, he is not a believer in Daniel's God. And so Nebuchadnezzar, you can tell, because when he got this vision, it just all went to his head. So the very next chapter, what he does is he builds a great golden image and has everybody come to worship it, because the gold represents him. And you remember that ended up with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They said, we will not worship it. And he had them thrown into a fiery furnace. And it was shortly after that Nebuchadnezzar absolutely lost his mind. And for 7 years, he roamed like an animal. It says he never cut his hair, never cut his fingernails, and he just slept outside and was not in control of himself. And after 7 years, it says that God restored his mind to him, and he came back to rule over the kingdom. But at that point, he changes everything, and he says, he became a believer in the God of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, would you go to the next one here? So here's this image, if you will. Gold at the top represents what kingdom? Babylonian. Silver represents what kingdom? Persia. Actually, it says Persia there, but it's the Medes, M-E-D-E-S, the Mede and Persian, or Medo-Persian Empire. Brass represents Alexander the Great's kingdom, and we're told that in the scriptures here in just a moment. And Alexander the Great, we'll talk about him some more in just a moment. Then you get down to the bottom, and I left it blank over on the side. From the calves on down, knees on down, were made out of iron, and then the feet were made from iron and clay. Popular theology, when I say popular, I mean it in the sense of what is commonly thought. And what I'll tell you this morning disagrees with what is commonly thought. And I'll give you again the reasons why. The common thought is this, is that the iron there represents the Roman Empire, because they were the kingdom that ruled over the land. They took over from the Alexander the Great's kingdom, and that the feet of iron and clay represents the revived Roman Empire that we'll have in these last days. You've got several problems with it. One is those kingdoms before, the Babylonian kingdom, the Medes and Persians, and the Alexander the Great's kingdom, when they came in and conquered, they conquered specific territory, and so the Medes and Persians and Alexander the Great, they all occupied the same territory that the kingdom of Babylon occupied. As a matter of fact, Alexander the Great, he died at age 32, he had, and so history puts it this way. It says he had conquered the known world. Well, really, it was the known world that was known to him, because his boundary actually stopped. If you head east from Babylon, he was from Macedonia, which is north of Greece, but his boundaries actually stopped at the Indus River. The Indus River flows north and south, starts in the Himalayas, and flows down through the nation of Pakistan, and so which borders India. So he never made it to India. How many know India was populated at the time? He never made it to China, which was north and west of India. So how many know that China was occupied at the time? I mean, we have plenty of history that shows it. It was occupied at the time. He never made it there. There are a number of stories about it. One is this. There was a book that I read. It was on maps that had changed the world. And it's not an exciting read. But Alexander stopped his campaign when he got to the Indus River. And one of the reasons that was cited is his troops refused to go further because they had no maps of anything beyond that point. So they stopped in Pakistan, had gone through Afghanistan, and then they backed up from there. And then Alexander, it's just interesting because the center of all of this vision is, because it's going to talk about God's holy city, Jerusalem, in a bit, but the center of this entire vision had to do with Nebuchadnezzar. He lived in Babylon. He ruled from Babylon. He had a massive kingdom. And then Daniel, when Daniel interprets Nebuchadnezzar's dream, he tells him, God's going to show you the nations that will follow after you. And so it was the nations that would occupy, world powers that would occupy the area that Nebuchadnezzar, or as the king of Babylon, all the territory they occupied. And what is commonly taught, that I believe is just a misunderstanding, is that the Roman Empire is the fourth kingdom. And I'll show you why as we go along here. Let's go to the next one. Here's a current map of what we consider the Middle East. The print's small if you're looking at it from your chair. On the very far left, or farthest west point there, is Morocco. That's northern Africa. You've got the Mediterranean Sea above it. Then Algeria, Libya, Egypt. And then we come on around down to south of Egypt is Sudan. You come on around and you have Israel, Jordan, Syria, up into Turkey, and then it goes all the way over through to Afghanistan. That's, and then the long one in the middle there, kind of going down to center to the bottom right side is Saudi Arabia, with Yemen at the bottom there on the Arabian Gulf, and then and then those smaller countries that are around Saudi Arabia. And so, but notice, if you will, the right side is Afghanistan. That's the current map of the Middle East. We go to the next one. Here's the Babylonian Empire. Babylon there, you can see, is pretty much in the middle. Notice the Babylonian Empire, it covered from Babylon, which is in modern-day Iraq, right on down to the Persian Gulf, and then goes all the way back around. That's Saudi Arabia that's not covered in, it's in the white color there, all the way around what's called the crescent, up through the north up into the area of southeastern Turkey, and then down through Jordan, Syria, down through what is Israel, and then down along the border that would cross over into Egypt. Say it out loud. There's the Babylonian Empire. So at the time Daniel prophesies this, and he says there's going to be 4 kingdoms altogether. There's going to be 3 kingdoms that come after yours. The 4th one is unique because that 4th kingdom, it's going to be this powerful kingdom that'll take over everything. But then that kingdom, it's going to be destroyed, but then it's going to raise back up in the last days. So there's the Babylonian Empire. Would you say it out loud? That one was first. Now notice the Babylonian Empire. On the upper left side there, you're in southeastern rather, Turkey. Would you notice this? If you were to go straight on up from there, you know where you're going to end up? You're going to end up in Europe. You go across Spain, over into France, Germany, to the east of it, all those, and then head further on north, Belgium and into Great Britain, and then cross the sea to the Scandinavian countries, Norway and Sweden, Finland. Would you notice this? The Babylonian kingdom didn't cover any of that territory, did it? No. So let's go to the next one. Here is the Medo-Persian Empire, because by the time we come about halfway through the book of Daniel, is when the Medes and the Persians came in and they took over the Babylonian Empire. Belshazzar, which was Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, was the king over the area. He's the one that there was the handwriting on the wall, because he had taken the golden vessels out of that they had captured from the Jerusalem temple when they destroyed Jerusalem 70 years earlier, and he was having a big party. He said he got bored. He said, well, let's do something different with this party. So he said, go bring the golden vessels and we'll drink. We'll continue drinking, but we'll drink out of the golden vessels that were used in temple worship in Jerusalem, where my grandfather destroyed it 70 years ago. And so that same night, Darius the Great came in, and Cyrus, and they wiped out that kingdom. Daniel interpreted the handwriting on the wall, said your kingdom's been, you've been weighed in the balance, you've been found wanting, and tonight your kingdom shall come to an end. And so when the Medes and the Persians took over, would you notice, can you remember what the Babylonian kind of looked like? Would you notice this sits right on top of the Babylonian Empire? On the right side, it goes all the way over to India. And that actually is the border with India. If you can see it at all, just back from where the right side ends, there's a little blue line there. I can read it standing here. That is the Indus River. And so the Babylonian kingdom had made it up to there, and then made it past that, the Medo-Persian Empire had made it past that right to the border of India, and then made it all the way up north into what would be Armenia, there in the center, and then over into, on the left side, into Turkey and into Greece. Would you notice they didn't make it to Germany, they didn't make it to France, they didn't make it to Great Britain? You with me? Let's go to the next one. Now here's the Greek Empire, Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great is, well, I'll tell you some more about him in a moment. But notice his kingdom, and he started off on his world conquest when he was 20 years old. And history puts it this way: he conquered the known world in 12 years. Well, known world should be qualified. Again, would you notice how far did he make it to the east? India. Did he capture India? No, they stopped there. How far did he make it to the west? Well, he made it around the Black Sea, and he's in Turkey. They're in the very middle between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. That's modern-day Armenia. And then down to the lower left side there, you have the land that borders up to Egypt, and so are Egypt. And so would you notice how that pretty much lays over Alexander's his empire? It pretty much lays over the Babylonian Empire and pretty much lays over the Mede and Persian Empire. Is that noticeable, everybody? Let's go to the next one. Here's the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, when you go to the west or to the left, Up at the very top left corner up there, again, print gets small, and so it's difficult to read probably for, I'm standing close enough to see it, but there's a city that's put in there. That's London. And so the Roman Empire went all the way up and captured most of Britain. And the ruins are still there today. They built magnificent structures, and they turned the Brits into their slaves. But then you go all the way across, and so they all the way down into Spain and what is currently, modern day Portugal, all the way up through the Roman Empire, goes up through what is France and Germany, and then along the northern part of North Africa there, which would be the northern parts of Egypt, Libya, Algeria, Morocco, and then it on the right side, what is in purple there, goes up through what is Jerusalem on up into modern-day Turkey. Now, what you'll notice is this, is the Roman Empire. Let me ask you the question. Does what they conquered and what they ruled over, does it look at all, just far as the geography of it, does it look like what the Babylonians and the Medes and the Persians and Alexander the Great ruled over? No, it doesn't match up at all, does it? Well, you know what that tells me? As a matter of fact, and you find from history, because the Roman Empire was split into two parts. You had the Western Empire and the Eastern Empire, and that's what's designated by the two colors there for the Roman Empire. Both empires existed simultaneously for just a little over 120 some years. And then there was a break between them. The Western Roman Empire declined. The Eastern Roman Empire stayed in existence for another long period of years. But you still find this. The closest they ever got to Babylon was 500 miles. I said the closest they ever got to Babylon was 500 miles. Under one of the Caesars, they went to make a military advance on that part of the world. As they started to, that Caesar got sick and he died. And so they gave up on the conquest and headed back to the west. So again, somebody said, why are you showing us this? Just as insight into that the fourth empire that's discussed here would not be the Roman Empire, because the fourth empire that's discussed here would, by necessity, it would rule over the same area as the Babylonian Empire, the Mede and Persian Empire, the Alexander the Great's empire, and that fourth kingdom would rule over the same place. The Roman Empire never ruled over Babylon. Alexander the Great not only ruled over Babylon, when he's 32 years old and dies, you know where he dies? Babylon. He dies in the palace of Darius II, who had abandoned them, and Darius II's mother actually referred to Alexander as, although there was no blood relation, they had gotten word at one point that Darius II, her son, because he fled when he heard Alexander was coming and left his family to whatever Alexander wanted to do. And when Alexander got there, instead of destroying them, he elevated them, had them coexist, and ruled over them, so much so, and with such a gracious way about it, that Darius II's mother there in Babylon referred to Alexander as her own son. And when her actual son died, Alexander had his body brought back to be buried in Babylon, and went to Darius's mother and said, I've brought your son's body back so you can go and mourn. And history quotes her as saying, I only have one son, and his name is Alexander. There's been family problems since there's been families. And so here you have the Roman Empire. Now we skip ahead a few centuries. Let's go to the next one. Here, this is in 900 A.D., or actually 800 and something A.D., the ninth century. And so here you have the Islamic Caliphate, and don't let the word caliphate throw you. It's just another word for empire. All right? So here's the Islamic Empire. Muhammad forms the Islamic religion in the middle of the 600s. He is a warrior and goes out on conquest. Notice this, Islam, by the time you come to the 9th century, they had imposed their kingdom, and notice how far over it goes. It goes all the way over to Afghanistan, and there's the Indus River again that runs down through there. It sits right on top of what the Babylonian Empire was, what the Mede and Persian Empire was, and what the Alexander the Great's empire was. Can you see that's totally different than where the Roman Empire controlled? I mean, the Roman Empire controlled kind of an edge of that, but the Islamic Caliphate at its peak here in the 9th century, it controls all the way over to, it controls the bottom half of Spain, goes all the way in the middle up into the north into Armenia, Azerbaijan, and all these other countries, all the way down through Saudi Arabia, down to Yemen, across Egypt, over all the way to Morocco, and so and the northern part of Libya. And so it just sits, the Islamic Caliphate or Islamic Empire just sits on top of that. Here's where we're going with this, and we'll see more proof of it. The fourth kingdom that's discussed there is the Islamic Caliphate or Islamic Kingdom. That kingdom stayed in existence, and it's amazing to me because, and I think part of it is this, because it's so little was taught to me about it in history as I went through, just the schooling education I had. But one thing was this: is anytime someone, if anyone ever talked about the Islamic religion from a negative perspective, and you still see that today, they were killed. And we see that in current news things in the last 2 or 3 years. Some cartoonist makes fun of Islam. People come and kill them. Or they go into hiding because there's death threats out on them. And so it was never something that was open for debate. You can, as a Christian, I can sit down and have a conversation with somebody who follows Buddhism or someone who is an Orthodox Jew, and we get along handsomely. You ever try to have a negative debate with somebody who's Islamic, you run the risk of, they tell their friends, you could be in where you're fighting for your life. And so, but the Islamic Caliphate lasted all the way up till World War I, when the Ottoman Empire was beaten. Now, so let's move forward. Somebody said, now, what did you get out of that? What I wanted you to see was this: is you saw where the Babylonian Empire, the territory they covered. That was pretty much the same territory that the Medes and the Persians covered. That was pretty much the same territory Alexander the Great conquered. Then you saw the Roman Empire. They didn't control the same area. Then you see the Islamic Caliphate, which is that fourth kingdom, and that kingdom, they controlled the same territory that Babylon, Medes and Persians, and Alexander the Great controlled. Only when the Islamic Caliphate came in, you know what they did? They wiped out everybody who was in front of them, and they didn't tolerate other religions. If you were not going to convert, you would either die or be heavily, 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 heavily taxed to the point that you fled. So now, let's go to Daniel chapter 5. Go to the next one for me. Well, here's just that image. Gold, Babylon; silver, Persia; brass, Greece under Alexander the Great; iron, the original Islamic Caliphate; iron, which ruled for over 1,000 years. Ruled over 1,000 years in that period, that area. And then iron and clay is the restored Islamic Caliphate, or a restored Islamic kingdom. Now let's go to next one, if you would. Daniel chapter 2, and that is the next one. Verse 31. We already read that part. Go forward for me, please. Right, let's stop right there. Back up to verse 38. You are this head of gold, but after you shall rise another kingdom inferior to yours, then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And again, when it says all the earth, it's talking about the Babylonian earth. Because they didn't rule over India, they didn't rule over China, they didn't rule over Russia, they didn't rule over Japan, they never made it to Australia, never made it down to Papua New Guinea, never made it to the Marshall Islands. Hawaii got left alone. Are you with me? So when it says all the earth, it was controlled by the Babylonians. Verse 40. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks into pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break into pieces and crush all others. Verse 41. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay, partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. Well, that kingdom is divided in the Islam into the Sunni and Shia sides of it. One side of that believes that all the successors and rulers should be natural descendants of Muhammad. The other side says no, it should be the folks who were military leaders under Muhammad. And you have that great divide that's continued ever since the death of Muhammad, and it continues right on to today. Let's go to the next one. And the toes of the feet were partly of iron, partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong, partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they'll mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in those days, the kings of, and in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. The kingdom shall not be left to another people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms. It shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces, the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. That's Jesus. He comes in and wipes out every kingdom that controlled that area prior to him, and he sets up his own rule over the earth for 1,000 years. The great God has made known to the king what shall come to pass after this. The dream is certain, its interpretation is sure. If you go to the next one for me. So we went through this. The head is gold, represents Babylon. The arms, silver, Medes and Persians. Belly and thighs of brass or bronze, Alexander the Great and the Greek kingdom. Legs of iron, and its feet partly of iron of clay. Two branches of Islam, Sunni and Shia. You go to the next one for me. Daniel chapter 7 now. And we'll jump right over to here. Verse 1. Now, where was Nebuchadnezzar? When did Nebuchadnezzar's vision happen? Daniel chapter what? Daniel chapter what? 2. Now we come over to Daniel chapter 7. Now, by the time we get to Daniel chapter 7, Nebuchadnezzar's grandson has been killed, and the Medes and Persians have taken over the kingdom. But Daniel does a flashback in chapter 7 and tells something that occurred to him personally before the Medes and Persians took over the kingdom. And it starts here in Daniel chapter 7 and verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, that's Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, Daniel had a dream, and the visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea. The four winds of the heavens is a poetical way of saying, I saw human history play out before me. The four winds of the heaven. I saw history roll on out before me. He actually saw all the way up to the second coming of Jesus, the moving of history, nations conquering nations, wars, times changing, God in control of the destiny of nations and history. Verse 3. And four great beasts, say it out loud, four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse from one another. They were different from each other. The sea refers to all the Gentile nations of the earth, and out of the Gentile nations, he's singling out four different empires that arose. And Bible scholars agree on this almost 100%, that Daniel's vision that we're reading about here in Daniel chapter 7 is a parallel to the vision or dream that Nebuchadnezzar had in Daniel chapter 2. The difference is, in Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar, when he has this dream, he sees this image that's got a head, shoulders, arms, belly, thighs, legs, and feet. And he describes it all. But when you come to Daniel's dream, he sees it in a different perspective. He sees it as different beasts. Say it out loud. Daniel sees different beasts. Now, again, did Daniel ask for this? How many of you have gone to sleep at night and had dreams you did not ask for? Well, this is a dream, but this dream isn't because he ate too much spicy food. It was a dream from God, this vision. Daniel chapter 7 and now verse 4. He said, the first beast I saw was like a lion. It says like a lion because then he adds this, but it had eagle's wings. I beheld the wings thereof, they were plucked, and it was lifted from the earth. If it was lifted from the earth, does everybody recognize that means it was ended? It was lifted from the earth and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And so that's referring to Nebuchadnezzar after he was lifted out of his kingdom, spent 7 years roaming around crazy, and then he was made to stand on his feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to him. This is Babylon. It coincides with the golden head of the statue in King Nebuchadnezzar. He had a rapidly rising empire. He is seen in one of the symbols of Babylon was the lion. They have lions everywhere in ancient engravings that you find and ceramics. Everybody know a lion is strong. He's referred to as the king of the what? King of the jungle. But if you want to make him fast, add 4 wings to him. And so Nebuchadnezzar was a lightning blitzkrieg kind of a leader in taking over his kingdom. Then we come to Daniel chapter. But after his mind returned to him, he became a believer in Nebuchadnezzar's God. Daniel chapter 7 and verse 5 now. He said, and behold, another beast, a second, like to, what kind of an animal? A bear. It raised itself up on one side. Would you say on one side? Let me paraphrase. It's a lopsided bear. It's raised up on one side. He said, it raised itself up on one side, had 3 ribs in its mouth between the teeth of it, and they said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh. This is the nation of the Medes and the Persians, but you have between the Medes and the Persians, the reason it's lopsided is one side was stronger than the other side. And the 3 ribs refer to divisions within the nation. And this is the same as a silver on the statue or image that was in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And again, both lion and bear are strong. Verse 6, he says, and then I beheld, and there was another beast came up, this one like, everybody say like a leopard. Now, here's the thing about a leopard. A leopard is considered faster, a leopard is considered faster than a bear, and a leopard is considered faster than a lion. He said this one was like a leopard, which upon its back it had 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had, and notice this part, the beast also had 4 what? 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. I won't take time I didn't even put it up on the screen, but I won't take time to attempt to show you the names and stuff because it ends up being just so much like a history class. Alexander the Great died when he was 32 years old, and he died in Babylon. He had conquered all of that Babylonian Empire, Median Persian Empire. Alexander the Great conquered all of that in 12 years. 12 years. Now, Alexander the Great, his father was Philip of Macedonia, which is in the northern end of Greece. Macedonia, of course, still is a country today. Alexander the Great, he lives around, in the middle of the 300s BC. His father was a military man and a conqueror. His father, how many know if you've got great wealth and you want your children to do well, you'll put them in the best schools available. So, do you know what his father did? His father brought over Aristotle, and Aristotle was his teacher for years. And that got me on, and I'll get off on this for just a second. That got me on a whole thing because, to tell you the truth, when I went through public schooling, I missed a lot of this. Not saying it wasn't said, I just missed a lot of it. Aristotle, his father dies when he's young, and Aristotle, at a young age, goes to Athens and stays in the school of Plato. Everybody heard of Plato? You can make shapes but don't eat it. But Plato, the philosopher Plato, he stays with Plato from the time he's 17 until about the time he's 37. The only reason he leaves Plato is Plato dies. And then Aristotle goes and travels around the Mediterranean, and he's considered one of the first published scientists. And so he studies botany, he studies all these different things of engineering and science, comes up with a lot of things that still influence our education and what's taught today in the world that we live in even now. But then after 7 years of traveling around, Philip of Macedonia said, come here, and I want you to be the tutor to tutor my son, who is Alexander, who later became Alexander the Great. Aristotle pushed him to be a world conqueror. And in the writings of Aristotle that remain, you find he was very, very much a racist against anybody who was not a Greek, especially against the Arabs that occupy, and Persians. He referred to them in very derogatory terms and said that all the Greeks and the people on this side of the Mediterranean, they should be treated like friends and relatives. But he referred to the Persians and the Arabs in very derogatory terms and said they should be treated like animals. So Alexander the Great, he then sets off at age 20, and he's given command of the army when he's still a teenager. His father dies, and then sets off on his world conquest under the tutelage of Aristotle. And so Alexander the Great, here's the thing that happened with him that affects me and you today. The New Testament that I have, is English translation. But what it's an English translation from is from the language it was originally written in, which was called this. So everybody say it out loud. Koine. Koine Greek. Koine is simply a Greek word, or the English version of it, that it means common. The Greek, and so I'm listening and studying all this, and I heard one Bible teacher who I greatly respect, he's a very learned scholar, say that Alexander the Great actually took 2 years and created the Koine Greek language because he knew that if you were going to have an empire, for it to exist, you would have to have a common language spoken among all the people in the empire. And this particular scholar, he made this statement, and I just couldn't find something to back it up from other sources. But it's still worth saying the statement because if I give him a call, I can probably find out where his source is. But that Alexander the Great took 2 years to create the Koine, or common Greek language, that then was every nation he conquered they were all forced to learn it. The Greek language goes back to 1300 BC, but Alexander the Great comes along over 1,000 years later, and so wherever he went, people, all the nations he conquered, the people ended up being bilingual. So much so that really you find it was this. It was a supernatural setup by God who used an unbeliever to help the spread of the gospel. Because the disciples all spoke Aramaic, but then they also all spoke common Greek, or Koine Greek. The New Testament is almost 100% written in common or Koine Greek. It was not classical Greek, and so it's considered more of a working man's version of the Greek language. Anybody ever been around somebody who is highly educated in English? And they use words that I find myself going, and then I have to go look them up. Well, that was classical Greek. But then you have the common man's language. I remember, and this isn't so much the common man's language, it is local English. Antoine Weiss, who many of you will remember, he and his wife, they serve as missionaries now, and he travels all over the world, but for 5 years he served as an associate pastor, assistant pastor here at our church. He's originally from the German-speaking part of Switzerland, and so Antoine was multilingual. He also spoke French and Italian, and Antoine, though, when he first moved here, he wasn't working for our church, but they felt to move here to the States, and his wife's an American who's also extremely fluent in Spanish and so fluent in German that when she was on the phone once, when she worked as secretary for us for a period of time, and she was talking to my friend John Angelina's wife, Mariana, who is who's German by birth, but also very eloquent in the German language. Her voice is used in a lot of commercials and television commercials and voiceovers in Germany, and so she is a master of German. And I remember talking to Mariana after she had talked to Chrissy Weiss, Antoine's wife, and Mariana thought that Chrissy was German. And I thought, you don't get a higher compliment in another language than if Mariana thought you were German, because she's so fluent in it. But then Antoine, he came here, and so one of the jobs he had before he came to work for the church, he was working on a construction crew doing foundations and building crew. And a guy one day said to him, go take, name somebody else's name, go take him square point shovel. A square point shovel. Everybody know what a square point shovel is? And so Antoine said, go get me a square point shovel. And so Antoine said, excuse me? He said, go get me a square point shovel. And he said, I'm sorry, could you say it one more time? In frustration, the guy said, go get me a square point shovel. And so by this time, Antoine had memorized the sounds. So he said, so Antoine's telling me the story. He said, so I walked over to the other guy and said, I need a square point shovel. And the fellow said, oh, sure. And handed him a square point shovel. I remember when Antoine told me that, I said, you're learning a version of English that only a few counties speak. So you had three main divisions of classical Greek language. Alexander the Great grew up speaking one of those major divisions of classical Greek, but then from him came the Koine, or the common Greek, that was spoken all throughout his kingdom. Well, we showed on the map there how far his kingdom went. It went all the way over to the border of India. So in all those, and then all the way over into Turkey, and then all along the northern part of Africa where it borders the Mediterranean Sea. Uh, and so you find this, that in all those areas, and Alexander the Great, by the way, he founded and named 17 cities after his own name. The most famous of which we still have today is Alexandria, Egypt. But this guy had an ego that was on steroids. And then he dies, of all places, and it seems very proper looking at it from God's perspective. Where does he die? In Babylon. Because everything about this prophecy centered around Babylon and then things that would happen to God's people, the Jews, over in Jerusalem. So you have this. I say Alexander the Great was used by God because by the time Alexander the Great dies at age 32, back in the 300s BC, by the time he dies, the whole kingdom that had been the Babylonian kingdom, then the Medo-Persian kingdom, and then Alexander the Great's kingdom, everybody was at least bilingual. They spoke whatever their mother tongue was, and they spoke common or Koine Greek. And it tells you another thing about God, that because it was the common Greek. I mean, that means it's going to be it's not going to have some of the nuances of classical Greek. It's going to be what the common folks spoke. And it lets you know this. The Bible's written in Koine Greek or common Greek because God's not interested in only reaching those who had the opportunity to have a great education. But he's interested in reaching those who are regular folks. Would you say it out loud? My God is interested in me and in the regular folks. So this fourth beast, he said, this third beast, like a leopard, which upon its back had 4 wings of a fowl. Here's what happened. When Alexander the Great died at age 32, there was immediately unrest of his leading generals. You know how many leading generals he had who ended up establishing empires? 4. And I've got their names here. I'd struggle to pronounce them correctly, so it's not even worth it. But you can Google it and see it real well. Then we come to this next one. He said, after this, so after he sees those 3, the Babylonian kingdom, which is the lion, Medo-Persian, which is the bear, Alexander the Great's kingdom, which was still, was yet to come. Even the Medo-Persian Empire, it was yet to come because all this happened before Belshazzar died. He sees all of this prior to it happening, but then he sees this 4th kingdom coming. And this 4th kingdom is in Daniel chapter 7, verse 7. He said, after this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast. Say it out loud, a 4th beast. A 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. Now, did you notice he doesn't say it was like any known animal? The reason he doesn't say it was like any known animal is he's never seen anything like this before. This 4th beast. He said it's terrifying, dreadful, terrible. It devoured and brake in pieces and stampeded the residue with the feet of it. It was diverse and different from all the beasts that went before it, and it had 10 horns. Now, again, Daniel, does he know that when Jesus comes, he can read in the Old Testament prophecies, the Messiah is going to come. Because Isaiah had lived over 200 years before Daniel got here. And Isaiah prophesied about the Messiah, that with his stripes we are healed. And he's going to come, he'll be bruised for our iniquities and for our sins, and he'll take them upon himself. He had read Isaiah's scrolls. He had read Jeremiah's scrolls. From Jeremiah's scrolls is how he knew they'd only be in captivity for 70 years. So Daniel, he knows the Messiah is going to come one day, but he doesn't know who he is. But does Daniel know that after that Jesus, matter of fact, he can read the Psalms and know Jesus will go to the cross and he'll die and he'll be resurrected, and that he will at the end of that, go up and be seated at the right hand of God. He can know all of that from reading the Old Testament that was available to him. But does he know that there's going to be a gap of a couple of thousand years between the resurrection of Jesus and the second coming of Jesus? No. Now, what you will find out is he does know from reading the Old Testament that there's going to be a period of time. Matter of fact, Daniel's already prophesied it, where there's going to be, Daniel's 70 weeks. There'll be 7 years that will be tribulation on the earth, worse than anyone's ever seen it, and that'll precede the coming of the Messiah. So he does know that. And he knows that Jesus, he doesn't know it's going to be Jesus, but he knows that the Christ, the Anointed One, the Son of God, will come to the earth and will rule and reign over the earth. So this fourth beast, he says it was strong exceedingly. He said it was diverse from all the other beasts that were before it. And then he just skips through, because where it says it was different and diverse from all the other beasts before it, you could put a parenthesis in there and put a gap, church age. Because when this beast returns, it goes down, and what's so different about it comes right back up, and it says it's got 10 heads, or 10 rulers, there's 10 kings. So this fourth beast correlates with the fourth kingdom of Daniel chapter 2, and the beast has iron teeth, just like that beast, that image had iron legs. It has crushing power. Now you find this. Let me ask you a question. When the Roman Empire came along, did it crush all the other kingdoms before it? Well, the answer would, from my perspective, would be no. One of the things you can tell is, did they destroy the Koine Greek language? No, they adopted it. Did they destroy all the Roman deities? No, the Greek deities? No, they just renamed them Greek names. They kept everything. When they came into Jerusalem, did they make them stop practicing Judaism? No. As long as they paid their taxes and didn't cause a rebellion, they left them alone. And they did that in all the places. Now, when there was an uprising, they were very cruel, and I started to say inhumane. Isn't it interesting? You ever heard of inhumane treatment? Did you ever notice the only people who do inhumane treatment are humans? Kind of a paradox, isn't it? Now, here's the thing you find, though, that Islam, it matches up with that fourth kingdom, because that fourth kingdom, when Islam comes in, they totally take over everything and destroy everything in their path, and everybody has to submit to their law. The Islamic Caliphate, when they came in and conquered that region, everybody had to convert or die. Because if you didn't convert, you were an infidel. And if you really chose not to convert and you had enough money, you could pay taxes enough to live and survive as an infidel or non-Islam. So the 10 horns, though, they represent a revival of whatever that fourth kingdom is. And out of those 10 horns, there's another horn that grows. That's a beast that grows out of those 10 horns. That beast that grows out of those 10 horns is called the little horn, and it is the Antichrist. And it comes from out of that. We go to the next one here. Verse 12. As for the rest of the beast, they had their dominion taken away. Yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. What's it mean their lives were prolonged for a season and a time? In other words, the Greek Empire, it was overrun by the Roman Empire, but yet it still continued to influence the Roman Empire right on through the whole time of the Roman Empire. They adopted Greek ways and what is called Hellenistic thought. They adopted things from the Greek philosophers and brought it right into Roman life. So was that kingdom just shut out completely? No, it was still prolonged. Its culture was prolonged right on into the Roman Empire. And so that's what it means there when it says their lives were prolonged for a season of time. I was watching in the night visions, and behold, verse 15. Now he skips all the way to the end of the tribulation. I was watching in the night. Let me get to my place in my notes so I'm with you. I'm going to go home and fix my printer. Daniel chapter 7, verse 12. Give me just a second here. Well, time's up. Let's read it. Verse 12. As for the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season at a time. I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. To him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion. Can everybody see there's only one person that can be? That's Jesus. His dominion was an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away. His kingdom, the one which shall not be destroyed. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit within my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near to one of those who stood by, this is an angel, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. Those four great beasts, which are four kings which arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and forever. Can you see there he skipped all the way to the end of the tribulation period? Verse 19. Then I wished to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and its nails of bronze, which devoured and broke in pieces and trampled the residue with its feet. And the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, before which three of those other kings fell. Namely, that horn which had eyes and a mouth, which spoke pompous words, and whose appearance was greater than his fellows. That's a reference to the Antichrist, who speaks pompous words against God. I was watching, and the same horn, that little horn, was making war against the saints and prevailing against them. Now let me ask you a question. Did Daniel know there was ever going to be Christians? No. So when he says the saints here, you know who he's referring to? People who are believers during the tribulation. Because he never knew the church age was going to exist. There are Jews that will get saved in the church age. There are Gentiles that will get saved, in the tribulation period. There are Jews and Gentiles that will get saved. He said the same, the Antichrist, was making war against the saints and prevailing against them. And it was so dreadful, he said, I was torn up in my insides until the Ancient of Days came. Everybody know who the Ancient of Days is? That's the Lord Jesus Christ. And a judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High. And the time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. Thus he said, the fourth kingdom shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it in pieces. The 10 horns are 10 kings, who shall arise from this kingdom, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the first ones, and shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High. He's describing what happens during the tribulation. and shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hands for a time and times and half a time. But the court shall be sealed, and they shall take away his dominion to consume and destroy it forever. Then the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole of heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all kingdoms shall serve and obey him. Verse 28. This is the end of the account. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly troubled me, and my countenance changed. But I kept the matter in my heart. Now, would you go to the next one for me? Daniel chapter 9 and verse 26. And I want to just spend the last few minutes on this. Daniel chapter 9. Verse 26. And I apologize for my technical difficulties. Let's read verse 26, and we'll start here. And this is Daniel's 70 weeks. He says, after 60, that's 60, and 2 weeks, 62 weeks are 483 years, because those weeks represent years, shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And then look at the next phrase. Would you say it after me? The people of the prince that shall come. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city. The city there is Jerusalem. And the sanctuary. The sanctuary is the temple there in Jerusalem. And the end thereof shall be with a flood. Unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. Would you say it one more time? The people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. So they'll destroy the city and they'll destroy the temple. If you look at modern photographs of Jerusalem, you'll notice that there's very little remaining of the Jewish temple that was there. Matter of fact, on top of it now is a mosque, a Muslim mosque called Dome of the Rock. And I spent an hour watching a documentary in preparing for today, where the person that produced the documentary, they went to the Middle East and they interviewed ministers who teach on end times. They interviewed rabbis, and they interviewed leading Islamic imams and Islamic scholars. And one of the questions that the interviewer had asked of one of the leading imams was the motivation behind groups like that we hear of today, like ISIS. Everybody's heard of ISIS, right? And his answer just absolutely shocked and surprised me. He said, because here he is, he's a leading Islamic scholar, an imam, religious leader in Islam. He said, the motivation behind ISIS, and you can see why this never makes the public news in our country once you hear what it is. Here's this particular man. His grandfather was the Grand Mufti, or the High Imam of Jerusalem. He said the main emphasis and what motivates behind those in ISIS is to push forward so that our Messiah, the 12th Imam, will come. He will come as a human, but then on his heels will come Jesus Christ. And Jesus will come to tell everyone that he was not God's son, and that Muhammad was right, and all should convert to Islam, and then Islam will take over the world. Did you catch that? It wasn't from somebody just off the street or something. I'm watching the video. Here's this guy. His credentials are certified. His position within Islam is certified. And he says it very calmly. He's speaking as an Islamic theologian, only the God he serves isn't the God of the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Because Islam, one of the main tenets of it is that God has no son. Matter of fact, if you were able to go into the Dome of the Rock, that you see that golden dome that sits in Jerusalem over the site of where the temple was, written around it in Arabic is this: God has no son. And they say that the 12th Imam will come back, and they're pushing it, and so there's a religious fervor with them, and what's with that religious fervor is an absolute hatred of the Jews and to destroy Israel and to wipe it out, but it's a religious fervor. I'll tell you, man without God, when he has a religion, becomes a monster and can justify the most horrible cruelties that you can imagine. But the motivation is their theology, which is a misguided theology, but that they need to push for what they're doing and to conquer all these things so the 12th Imam can come back, because on his heels will come Jesus, and Jesus will testify to everyone, I am not God's son, Muhammad was correct, and you should all turn to Islam. I sat there and my mouth was hanging open. Are you listening to me? And so he says, the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Now, Jesus dies around 28, 29 BC, okay? Just a little over 40 years later, in 70 AD, the Romans came and destroyed Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. And so I noticed this. It is such a common thought that the fourth kingdom is not Islam, but it's the Roman Empire, and at the end of the ages there'll be a revised Roman Empire. That I was reading this in my Amplified Bible, and in my Amplified Bible, when you come to this verse, and it says, the people of the prince that shall come, it puts in brackets there, the Roman Empire. Now what's interesting to me, just being a student of history, is in World War II, the fascist leader of Italy, Mussolini, one of his goals was to reestablish the Roman Empire. It didn't work out. And how many of you know that right now today, Italy, and I have a lot of Italian friends in Italy, have preached in Italy. I'll tell you right now today, Italy is not considered a world empire threat. They have great problems within their own economy. Are you with me? And nobody in the European Union is concerned that Italy is going to suddenly take over the world. And in Jerusalem, do you know there is no fear there of the Italians coming? Yet who is Jerusalem surrounded by? A number of nations, but see, the Babylonian kingdom, you became part of that kingdom. The Medes and Persians, you became part of that kingdom. Alexander the Great, when you were conquered by him, you became part of Alexander the Great's kingdom. Islam knows no border. It's no wonder that when Daniel saw that beast, he said, I've never seen a beast like that before. I cannot compare it to anything in the animal kingdom. Because Islam is all over the world, covers countless borders and languages. And yet Islam and all the nations that surround Israel are predominantly Islamic. Somebody said, are you knocking Arab people? No, I have so many Arab friends that are Christians. So many friends of mine who have gone to Israel, their tour guides were Palestinian Christians. And they were able to relate to them a lot more than they were the Jewish population, because they were spiritually of the same Father. Are you with me? But then you have all of this around the area, people of all different tribes and nations and every kind of color, if you will, and ethnic background, who have converted to Islam. And Daniel said, that fourth beast, I never saw one like it before. And that fourth beast, it was subdued by the time you come to the 1920s, but now it's rising back up again. And its goal, as stated, and the only thing that unites these people, because they're like clay and iron, they don't mix well together, their only unification is over, we're going to drive Israel into the sea until it ceases to exist. And Daniel saw all of that over 400 years before Jesus came to the earth. After 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, not for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come. Here is what I wanted to just give you this, and then we got one verse and I'll quit. This is just from history on who are the people of the prince to come. Because who conquered Israel? Who conquered Jerusalem in 70 AD? The Romans did. But by the time you come to 70 AD, and this is just history, you had a historian of the Roman Empire that lived in the first century, Publius Cornelius Tacitus. He wrote in describing that. He said, speaking of the Roman attack of Jerusalem, he detailed the specific legions and the people that primarily composed the attacking army. Because by the time the Roman Empire had spread out, they were taking recruits from conquered nations. He said, Titus Caesar found in Judea 3 legions, the 5th, the 10th, and the 15th. To these he added the 12th from Syria. Those are all Syrian people. Some men belonging to the 18th and the 3rd, whom he had withdrawn from Alexandria, that's Egypt. So all of these people, Islam doesn't exist yet, but they are the ancestors, they're the Arab ancestors of Muhammad, who would one day hear from devils, who by his own account said spirits gave him the book of Islam. Then you have the second witness is Titus Flavius Josephus. Josephus is famous for so many things because he actually writes about Jesus as well. But Josephus, he lived from 35 or 37 AD, died in 100 AD. So he died 30 years after the Romans had taken over Jerusalem and destroyed it. And so Josephus, he was born and grew up in Jerusalem as a Jew. When the Romans came, they all hid out. He ended up defecting to the Romans and was viewed as a traitor by the Jewish people, but he ended up having favor in the Romans with the Roman Caesars and ended up in a place of leadership with the Romans. And so he writes of those different groups that came. He said, Malchus, also the king of Arabia, these are the people who destroyed Jerusalem under the Romans, sent 1,000 horsemen beside 5,000 footmen, the greater part of which were archers. So the whole army, including the auxiliaries sent by the kings as well as the horsemen, were all united together and accounted to 60,000. And so that number on how many were there fluctuates between 55,000 that sieged Jerusalem up to 60,000. But when you come to the different legions that were there, they are all, how many, if you're going to describe somebody, let's say somebody, you've got to describe to the police someone who did something wrong. You saw someone run out of a store, and then you found out they had robbed the store. And the police come, and they say, what did they look like? And your answer is, they were an American. How many of you know you have no idea what they look like? Now, how many of you know the Apostle Paul, ethnically, what was the Apostle Paul? Ethnically. He was a Jew. But his citizenship was Roman. So, we use a lot of hyphenated things, Italian American, African American, Scandinavian American. I mean, we go on down the list, all right? Within the Roman Empire, you could buy or you could be born into Roman citizenship, depending on who you were connected to, and it gave you special rights and privileges. But you find this: Roman citizens looked like everything you can imagine as far as exterior. And then the Roman army, they weren't all Roman citizens, but it says they were from Syria, from Macedonia, they were from all these different places in the Jordan there. And you know what but they all wore the Roman uniform, they all carried the Roman flags, they all came in as the Roman army. But who were they really? Well, you come to this. History from first century historian Josephus, he says this, that when Jerusalem was taken, the number of people that were actually Romans who were there was 1 in 11. That the rest of the people were of Arab descent. You know why? They were the people of the prince who would come. Somebody said, are you knocking all Arabs? No, I'm just telling you the Bible tells you who the groups will be that will try to destroy Jerusalem during the tribulation period. That's why, as you see, for me, you know, I do watch television. I enjoy television. I do watch the news. Debbie hates it. She doesn't enjoy it unless it's happy news. And so I have to watch it when she's not in the room. So I sneak and watch the news so as not to irritate her. But what you've noticed is Islam is spreading. I mean, and then, you know, I travel, you know, at least once a year or more to Europe. You watch, Islam is spreading all throughout that continent. It's spreading all throughout that continent. And you find that there are Islamic people who it's like anything else. There's Islamic people who are absolutely wonderful people. No group got all the bad folks. But then there's also a percentage of them who are highly motivated to wipe out anyone who is a non-Muslim and to perform acts of terror and killing and murder and disrupt things because everyone who's not a member of their religion is considered an infidel. And so you have when I want to find it here and give you the quotes, because when Jerusalem was attacked, they actually burned the temple to the ground. Titus was the Roman general there. He went and tried to stop them. And I can't find it in my notes right now, but I've read this so much, I've got it ingrained in my memory. He tried to stop them, but it was primarily the Syrians and the other Arabs, it said, because of their hatred for the Jews, they disobeyed the orders of a Roman general and went ahead and burnt the temple to the ground, the Jewish temple. That was the predecessors or the ancestors, if you will, of the people the kingdom which is to come. And it was the people who destroyed the temple. Their descendants will be the ones who try to destroy Israel in these last days that we live in. Somebody said, well, how does that affect you? When I watch the news, it's very alarming. I certainly don't want to see bloodshed and innocent people hurt. But yet at the same time, on a separate track in the back of my mind, I know this: Jesus is coming soon. All the signs are in place. And Jesus is coming soon. Will you go to the last scripture? Oh, back up one for me, because that was important. The word translated people the prince of the people who should come. If it was going to be a nation, the Hebrew word that's translated is usually G-O-Y, goy. But instead it's this word, am, and it means a people, specifically a tribe, like Israel would be referred to as a people. Hence, collectively, the troops were attendants, figuratively, a flock. And so when it says the prince of the people that shall come, it means a whole group of people that because of their common religion, they make up a tribe. Last verse now. Revelation 11 and verse 15. And then the seventh angel blew his horn, his trumpet. And there were mighty voices in heaven shouting, "The dominion, kingdom, sovereignty, and rule of the world has now come into the possession and become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, the Messiah. And he shall reign forever and ever for the eternity of eternities." So we are coming into this last days. The world will be in great turmoil. We will leave with the world in great turmoil. It really goes into great turmoil once we leave, the church leaves. And then you have 7 years of the worst time the earth has ever seen. Aren't you glad you get to skip it? I'll tell you what, there's been some times when the weather was bad here and we went on vacation, or we were somewhere and we left there and then the weather got bad there. I was glad I missed the storm and the tornadoes. I'm glad I'll get to miss the tribulation. If you run into Christians that are preparing for it, I'm not asking you to correct them. You might want to tell them where your food supplies are because they can have them after you're gone. Because what a nice surprise for them. They'll go in the rapture. I don't know how much they got invested in beans and rice, but they'll go in the rapture. And then we come back with Jesus, and he establishes his throne and dominion forever and forever. And Daniel gives us the outline of it over 400 years before Jesus comes the first time. Ushers, would you come forward, please?